It was a chilly December evening when Mr. Rence set out on his quest. Rence pulled his blue van into the parking lot of Walmart, gliding to a stop in front of the soda aisle. Stepping out of the van, he made his way down the aisle, scanning the rows of soft drinks. There it was. Coca-Cola, Pepsi, RC Cola, Dr. Pepper. But his heart was set on one thing: Mountain Dew. Where is it? He muttered to himself, frustration growing as he paced back and forth. It's not here, he exclaimed, irritation bubbling over as he knocked a few cases of 20-ounce bottles to the floor. Calm down, Mr. Rence, he chastised himself, taking a deep breath. Maybe they just haven't restocked yet. I'll ask the customer service desk. I'm sure they have more in the back. With determination, he made his way to the other side of the store, finally spotting the customer service desk.
"Excuse me," he said, addressing the young woman behind the counter. She turned, her expression brightening slightly. "How can I help you?"
I hate to bother you, but I can't find any Mountain Dew. Do you have any in the back?
The young woman's smile faded. "I'm sorry, but all the Mountain Dew has been shipped out to every mall across the country. Apparently the mall Santas need a sugary, caffeinated boost to handle all the screaming kids."
They did what? Mr. Rence shouted, anger flaring.
"Sir, please calm down," she urged, trying to maintain her composure. "Everything will be okay. You could always order some online."
Forget online orders, he bellowed, raising his voice. I need my Mountain Dew, now. It's the only thing I drink, and it fuels my supersonic van. I demand Mountain Dew.
"I can't give you something I don't have," she replied, her voice shaky. "And honestly, you're kind of scaring me. I wish I could help."
Are you saying there's Mountain Dew at the mall? He pressed, his eyes narrowing.
"I promise," she said quickly. "I wouldn't lie to you. You're terrifying."
Then I'll just have to pay the mall a visit, Mr. Rence declared, a wild look in his eyes. Back at his van, Mr. Rence's mind raced. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, still seething. Mr. Rence, I need my Mountain Dew. I need it now. I'll do whatever it takes. Suddenly, a light bulb went off in his head. Mr. Rence, wait a minute. What if I just get a job as a mall Santa? That way they can't deny me my Mountain Dew. With a manic grin spreading across his face, he revved the engine and sped off into the night, ready to embark on an absurd quest for his beloved drink. Mr. Rence drove home with a singular focus, ultimately crashing his van into the dining room, just like he did every other day. Mr. Rence's wife. Good evening, honey. How was your day? Mr. Rence. Not now, babe. All I can think about is my precious Mountain Dew. Mr. Rence's wife. What happened? I've never seen you this obsessed with Mountain Dew before. Mr. Rence. It's simple. There was none at the store. One of the clerks told me all the stock is at the mall. I'm determined to get my Mountain Dew. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to come up with a plan. Mr. Rence's wife. What are you going to do? Mr. Rence. Just watch me. I'm going to enlist a little help from my friends. The next day, Colton, Zach, and Chris sat in Mrs. Jackson's classroom, trying to focus on a biology lecture when suddenly, Mr. Rence and his van crashed through the door. The van collided with a bookshelf, sending it toppling over and scattering books everywhere. One even smacked Mrs. Jackson right on the head. Mrs. Jackson, watch where you park. I've accepted that you'll park in my classroom, but if another book hits me, I swear I'll sue. Mr. Rence, go ahead and try, Mrs. Jackson. I'm too quick. No subpoena could make me show up. I'll just fly my van out of the country. Mrs. Jackson. Whatever. Let me guess. You're here for Colton, Zach, and Chris? Mr. Rence. Who else would I be here for, you fool? Mrs. Jackson. Why are you acting even weirder than usual? Chris. I know why. He hasn't had his Mountain Dew. I get cranky too when I don't have grass with my cereal. Mrs. Jackson. Of course you eat grass with your cereal. Why am I not surprised? Mrs. Jackson. Anyway, today is the last day before Christmas break, so I don't mind if you take them. We'll pick up the biology unit again in January. Mr. Rence? Well, that was easy. Mr. Rence motioned for Colton, Zach, and Chris to hop in the van. As they piled into the vehicle, Mr. Rence revved the engine and sped out of the classroom. Zach, why are you in such a hurry? Mr. Rence. The store. They shipped all the Mountain Dew to the mall. They gave it all to those greedy mall Santas. Chris, so now you're going to dress up as a mall Santa? Once we infiltrate, you'll steal all the Mountain Dew? Chris, of course we're doing that. You'd do anything for a Mountain Dew. Colton. It's Mr. Rence. What did you expect? Mr. Rence. Hey, I'm not that crazy. Zach. Yes, you are. Mr. Rence. Oh, whatever. Let's swing by Albright to pick up Mr. Callaway. Then we're heading to the abandoned warehouse to grab Mr. Dugan. I need all the help I can get for this plan. Everything has to go perfectly. At Albright, Mr. Callaway stood in front of his classroom, passionately delivering a lesson. Mr. Callaway, and that's why I have an intense fear of gumballs. Mr. Callaway confessed, glancing around at his intrigued students. A hand shot up in the back. Mr. Callaway. Yes, Carl. Carl, what do you do if you see a gumball machine in public? Mr. Callaway. I might just toss it out the nearest window. As he continued to elaborate on his gumball phobia, Mr. Rence suddenly crashed into the classroom in his van, skidding to a halt right in front of the coffee maker. Mr. Rence. Hey, Mr. Callaway, we need you to come with us. Mr. Callaway. What's the emergency this time, Mr. Rence? Can't you see I'm in the middle of something important? Mr. Rence, I'll explain everything once we pick up Mr. Dugan. I already had to explain this to the 3 idiots in the back seat, and I don't want to repeat myself. Mr. Callaway. Fine. Mr. Callaway relented, opening the passenger door and sliding into the van. Mr. Callaway. I'll text one of the assistant teachers to take over my class. He rolled down the window, addressing his students one last time. Mr. Callaway. Hey everyone, behave while I'm gone. The assistant teacher will be here soon. I have to, run an errand. Chris. Nice save! Chris called from the back seat as Mr. Rence drove the van out of the classroom. Later, at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town, Mr. Dugan was busy in the basement, using a paintbrush to apply blood to a white cloth when Mr. Rence's van crashed through the wall. Mr. Rence, we need you, Mr. Dugan. Mr. Dugan set his paintbrush down and dipped it back into the bucket of blood, turning to face the van. Mr. Dugan. What's going on? I was in the middle of something important. Mr. Rence. There's no Mountain Dew. This is a critical mission. Get in the van. Recognizing the absurd seriousness of the situation, Mr. Dugan begrudgingly opened the back door and slid in behind Colton, Zach, and Chris. As Mr. Rence maneuvered the van out of the warehouse, he began to explain the plan. Mr. Rence. Listen up. The mall Santas have been given the world's entire supply of Mountain Dew. My van runs on it, and I depend on it to survive. Mr. Dugan. So what's the plan? Mr. Rence, I'm going to dress up as a mall Santa, and you guys will be elves and reindeer. Mr. Dugan, I am not dressing up as an elf. Mr. Rence, but I need everyone in our group for this to work. Mr. Dugan, you have no idea how much I want to stab you right now. Fine, so who's doing what? Mr. Rence, Zach and Chris will be reindeer, while I'll be the mall Santa and Mr. Callaway will be the elf. Mr. Callaway, that sounds fun. I don't mind. Mr. Rence. And since Mr. Dugan is not interested in costumes, you can stick to what you do best. Mr. Dugan. Killing people? Mr. Rence. Exactly. To ensure I get all the Mountain Dew, you'll poison the bottles that the other mall Santas drink from. Once they're out of the picture, I can grab all the tainted Mountain Dew for us. Chris. Sounds good. Mr. Rence. Does everyone understand the plan and their roles? Mr. Rence asked, looking around the van. Group, sir, yes, sir. The group responded in unison as Mr. Rence drove the van deeper into town.
Rence navigated the van through the town before stopping in a shadowy alley behind the library.
We're here.
He called back to Mr. Dugan, who was seated in the rear.
All right, everyone, I'll be right back.
Mr. Dugan replied, unbuckling his seatbelt and moving to the front of the van to exit through the back door.
Where are you headed?
Chris inquired, curious.
I need to grab some poison to spike the Mountain Dew later.
How do you plan to do that?
Zach asked, raising an eyebrow.
I know a guy. He's meeting me in the alley.
Mr. Dugan replied cryptically.
Enough with the questions. Just trust me.
With that, he stepped out of the van and melted into the darkness of the alleyway.
You got the stuff?
Mr. Dugan asked as a shadowy figure approached him.
Of course. I'm hooking up one of my best jail buddies with the finest poison on the market. But first, did you manage to get a urine sample from anyone? I've got a drug test coming up for a job interview, and I can't risk it. I use too many substances. Yeah, I've got it. My buddy Mr. Rence doesn't touch drugs. I've got you his sample. Perfect.
The man said, glancing around to ensure the coast was clear. They exchanged the sample for the poison in a swift, discreet transaction. When Mr. Dugan returned to the van, Mr. Rence asked,
How did it go? It went well, but you'd better not breathe a word of this to anyone. The poison I bought is illegal in over 90 countries. If you say anything, I'll have to take drastic measures.
The only witness is my grass.
Chris chimed in, trying to lighten the mood.
Please, no one cares about your grass.
Are we good?
Mr. Callaway asked, a hint of concern in his voice.
I think so. We've got the poison, and tomorrow we'll put our plan into action. For now, let's stay put and rest in the van. We'll hit the mall bright and early.
The next day, Mr. Rence and his crew arrived at the mall early to meet up with the rest of their small crew. Once inside, Mr. Rence gathered everyone in a quiet hallway and handed out costumes.
Here you go, Colton. You're Rudolph.
Zack caught a reindeer costume thrown his way, and Chris received one too.
We'll be right back.
Chris said as he and Zack headed to the bathroom to change.
That just leaves you. Here's your elf costume.
Mr. Rence said, turning to Mr. Callaway.
Do you really think this plan will work?
Colton asked Zack and Chris as they changed in the bathroom.
Our plans always work.
Yeah, lighten up.
I don't know. This one involves more people than just us and Mr. Rence.
Other people were involved then too. Hey, remember the turkey heist?
I just hope Mr. Rence isn't being reckless with this. There are way more chances to get caught. True, but we only had to deal with a farmer. Now we have kids, parents, and mall staff to worry about.
Relax, man. Everyone's too busy prepping for Christmas to notice us.
Maybe you're right.
Colton admitted, feeling a bit reassured. A few minutes later, the group reconvened in the mall's break room.
Hey, Mr. Rence, are you really sure about this?
Of course, why wouldn't I be? It's Mountain Dew. Nothing comes between me and my Mountain Dew.
I just feel weird about this being our second heist in a row.
Wait a minute. The Thanksgiving heist was your idea. You were unprepared and made us steal a turkey from an old man. Now you want to act like the moral compass? If anyone should be worried, it's me. I'm already wanted for multiple murders I've committed in my spare time. Don't pretend you're the righteous one now.
Let's be honest, we all have our vices. I drive like a maniac every day. Mr. Dugan has more skeletons in his closet than anyone can count. Mr. Callaway once hatched a scheme to swipe a turkey with us. Colton, well, he has a unique way of dealing with his frustrations. Let's just say his snot is a weapon. And Zack? He's got a bit of an anger problem, to put it mildly. As for Chris, he's the self-proclaimed king of lawn ownership, regardless of whose grass it is. If we can dabble in crime on our own time, why not band together? It's way more fun as a team.
I guess you have a point.
Mr. Dugan replied, a sly grin spreading across his face.
Perfect. Let's gather everyone and make this work. Come on, let's head out.
As they exited the break room, Mr. Rence called out.
All right, everyone, follow me. I'll join the other mall Santas, and you guys can join the ranks. Colton, Zack, Chris, Mr. Callaway. Let's put on the show we practiced for the families. Mr. Dugan, you just wait for your cue to spike the Mountain Dew.
Understood. I'll just take a quick nap and you can wake me when it's my turn.
Later that afternoon, Mr. Rence stood proudly at the center of the mall, decked out in his Santa suit, flanked by Colton, Zack, Chris, and Mr. Callaway, who were all dressed as reindeer and elves.
Merry Christmas, kids. I'm Santa Claus, and this year I have my favorite reindeer with me, Rudolph.
He pointed at Colton, who was decked out in a Rudolph costume.
Rudolph is going to show off a special trick.
Colton, recognizing his cue, rolled over and then knelt, begging for a treat like a dog playing the part of Rudolph.
This is beyond embarrassing.
Colton thought, but he was determined to support his friend, Mr. Rence.
And this here is my reindeer named Stinky.
Without missing a beat, Zack discreetly sprayed some fart spray into the air.
Do you smell that? That's why we call him Stinky. Keep it up and I'll return the favor.
Zack shot back, sticking his tongue out. The performance continued for another 45 minutes until the mall Santas and their troupe took their first break. Mr. Rence, Colton, Zach, Chris, and Mr. Callaway regrouped with Mr. Dugan to finalize their plan. "Now's our chance," Mr. Rence announced. "The performers are heading to the break room for lunch, and I found a shortcut. We'll have just enough time to poison the Mountain Dew before they arrive."
Let's do this, Mr. Dugan said eagerly. I'd prefer to stab them, but poison will suffice.
And with that, the group set off down their secret path. Once they entered the break room, Mr. Rence's eyes lit up as he spotted the Mountain Dew he had been searching for.
It's mine! All mine! He exclaimed joyfully. Wait a second, Mr. Dugan interjected. I need to poison a few bottles first so the other performers will pass out. Oh, right. I got a bit too excited, Mr. Rence replied, taking a seat at one of the tables.
Mr. Dugan opened several bottles of Mountain Dew and declared,
Here we go, the moment of truth.
He dropped a poisonous tablet into each bottle before capping them and arranging them neatly on the table, setting aside a separate stash of untainted Mountain Dew for Mr. Rence to grab later.
All set. This better work, he said, a hint of anxiety in his voice.
At that moment, a group of performers rushed into the break room and settled down for lunch.
Sweet Mountain Dew, one performer shouted, quickly opening a bottle and guzzling it down.
Yes, drink up, you fool, Mr. Rence muttered under his breath while munching on his sandwich.
Hey, what's your name? One of the performers asked Mr. Rence. I don't think I've seen you around before.
Oh, I'm the new guy, Mr. Rence fibbed. Started off as a mall Santa today. Had a performance on the first floor. He gestured toward Colton, Zach, Chris, and Mr. Callaway. These guys were my co-stars. I'm Derek, by the way, he added, using a fake name to disguise his identity.
You look kind of familiar, one performer remarked. I swear I've seen your name in the news before. Yeah, another chimed in. Aren't you the guy who drives recklessly through town in a blue van with 3 high school kids in the back? Isn't your name Mr. Rence? Asked yet another performer.
No, that's my twin brother, Mr. Rence lied again. My name is Derek, I promise.
I guess I trust you, one performer started to say. But before he could finish, he began to choke as his throat constricted. I think there's something in my food, he gasped. I can't breathe. I feel like I've been poisoned.
He collapsed to the floor, and another performer rushed to his side, only to drop down as well. One by one, the performers fell victim to the poisoned Mountain Dew.
Yes, we did it, Mr. Rence cheered, high-fiving Mr. Dugan. Your poison tablets were a success. Everyone, grab the Mountain Dew. Not that one, Mr. Rence yelled as Chris reached for a bottle. That's one of the poisoned ones. I meant the pile over there. He pointed to the safe stash.
You could have just said that, Chris retorted as he grabbed a few bottles from the correct pile.
The group quickly loaded the bottles into their bags and hurried out of the break room, ensuring no one noticed the unconscious performers. They sprinted through the parking lot until they reached Mr. Rence's van and climbed inside.
We did it, Mr. Rence exclaimed. I've got a month's worth of Mountain Dew to fuel my van and quench my thirst. By January, when I need more, they should be back on the shelves.
Let's hope so, Chris replied. That was nerve-wracking, watching those poor people pass out.
It didn't bother me too much, Mr. Dugan shrugged. I've seen far worse. That was like a stroll through the park. Anyway, Mr. Rence chimed in, breaking the tension. I'll drop you all off at home. You deserve to spend tomorrow with your families. After all, it's Christmas Eve. With that, he sped off through the town, ready to drop his friends at their respective houses.